When did we meet, if you recall?
Um, Man, it's been a while, so I guess thinking back, it would have been shortly after I got taken in as a slave. I think you were like a helicopter pilot and you crashed out and you got enslaved too. Of course, back then I didn't have much left of my memory because I got shot in the head. So you kind of helped me get through that.
Yeah, my story, and for all those joining in, is I was a helicopter pilot coming from overseas, crash landed, tried to find my crew, uh, got a little banged up, and captured and enslaved. I spent most of my time under the false Legio's rule, and eventually was with our friend here, Dominus Vindicta here, and he was kind of there from the very beginning. I don't know. Do you remember much about Cassius in the beginning?
I think I ran into him a few times before I ever ended up in the Legion, just in passing, now that I have my recollection back to me. And back then, he was like a priest of Mars of some kind. He had pretty big power armor, and he usually wore like a fancy, like silver mask. And he was relatively friendly to people that were passing through the area. He was sitting around a campfire with a bunch of people, and just telling stories about war. And that's kind of my first time I ever met him. And I feel like it's the only time I met him up until everything happened that happened.
Oh yeah, the schism. I guess tell me about any of the interesting moments that you remember from being in the False Legion.
Well, we did a lot of nothing. That was something notable.
Yes, we did.
We stood around so that we could go and march somewhere and listen to shitty music and then stand around somewhere else. And it was never somewhere where we might meet anybody. It was always somewhere far off from any sort of trouble. And then
Hmm.
when trouble found us, we would be the first to run away.
Yeah, I watched numerous times when our entire legion would retreat under the order of the legate, and those that didn't either were crucified, decimated, or outcast. Kind of like us, if you recall towards the end.
Yeah, I think in a way, the false legate always hated us for what we were,
Hmm.
which was warriors.
Yeah, it's funny because you have to give that false legate some amount of credit because he turned me, a man who was just trying to find his crew, into really a true believer of this. I'm a firm believer and a worshiper of Nemesis. She saved my life and showed me really the darkness that surrounds us all. If it hadn't have been for him and really his peacemongering that led us to be so weak that it cost me my life, then I never would have been able to understand the true strength that was actually behind the Kaiser and his true legion. Had it not been for that false legate, I think I wouldn't have been here today.
I'm not sure if I would either, honestly, or maybe I would have gotten complacent and comfortable doing nothing all the time. I'm not sure.
Yeah. Uh, I do know that he started sending us out just essentially on suicide missions over and over again. Can you tell me anything about that?
Well, I mean, you know as well as I do that dissenters got sent out on those type of missions. Just the problem that he had was that we kept coming back from them, whereas the people he sent with us did not. And so, we probably accelerated our disillusion with Legion with all that happening.
I,
The
I
more I think about it.
I couldn't agree more. It was definitely showing his fury towards the end. And when every time we would come back and our brothers and sisters would hate us a little bit more, it was definitely peculiar. It was like they wanted us to die. You could feel that and the entire legion wanted us true
Gone.
followers of Kaiser gone. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Do you remember anything about that night? When it happened?
Hmm. Well, I know that I feel like the kind of powder keg event was probably Cassius coming back. I don't think the legate was prepared to deal with someone with that much influence and power and money returning and overnight raising a military out of people who dissented against him.
Yeah, no, I agree that the return of Cassius had a lot, if not almost everything, to play in that. We were outcast and running messages to anyone loyal to the Kaiser, but those were far and few between. It was hard to get word out. If there's one thing you can say about that false legate is he wanted to make sure no one in the Legion knew of his traitorous ways and his peacemongering. At least that's from my
He
point of
did
view.
that by, I mean, he did that by empowering the stupid.
Hmm.
So a lot of the people that surrounded him were not intelligent people,
I couldn't
but he
agree more.
treated them like they were, and so they became disillusioned with their own intelligence.
I would say that mass, that charade, definitely fell apart for me, for them, probably at that radio tower. If you remember, um, it was either that radio tower or it was what the 3 day siege on their castle that ended with their false legate crucified by my hand on top of that castle.
Hmm. Well, I mean, I think crucifying him sent the most solid message, but honestly,
What?
I'm just glad that we were able to amass that many soldiers. I was a little surprised. I knew people didn't like him, but I didn't think there was that many.
Yeah, I think everyone kind of understood what was going on and how traitorous he truly was by the time that. But I think right after the radio tower, like people started to really realize, how just wrong the false legate was. And it to me, it was shown by just the pure tenacity of the Black Legion at that time. Like it has been and has remained a completely unstoppable force. I mean, am I wrong in that?
Oh no, and it really did snowball too. I mean, once we took them out, we immediately went to war with the communists. I mean, and the
Well,
Brotherhood rallied to their aid. And
yeah. Let's talk about that. So I'm gonna pull up
yeah,
some notes here on the war declaration. So obviously, the first thing that happened was that we declared war on Legio, or on the false legion, and it took us, was it 3 days of a siege? First, they lost three-fourths of all their land in a matter of hours, but they held strong in that castle. I will give them that; they are good at hiding.
it wasn't hard to do. There's just not a lot of ways in, unfortunately. And no matter how many men you have in a siege, if you can hold down a singular, like 4 foot in width door, yeah, I mean, no shit, you're gonna win.
Yeah, yeah. So
But
we ended up turning into poisoning their wells, and what I think it was 3 days. Am I wrong? I'll ask
we
Cassius.
poisoned their wells, and of course, sappers and a little bit of sabotage getting inside, and then we managed to take
What was ours? Yeah. So then on the, I believe it was the 26th when the war was actually declared. The 26th of February in the year. We declared war on, and it was the only war we've declared. We declared war on the communists, and the Brotherhood decided to back them up. Do you remember how long the Brotherhood was able to stay in the battle before we conquered? What was it? 2/3 of their land? A half before they
I
surrendered?
believe it was only a few hours I was in the fight,
Yeah.
and so I remember vividly that we rolled in and took the first town in about 10 minutes and held it for. Honestly, we spent more time holding areas than actually attacking,
Yeah. Yeah. It was
and
trying to
so
find spare ammo is really our problem. You're right. Um, Yeah, according to our official scribes, the Brotherhood of Steel, funny calling them scribes when the Brotherhood's here, the Brotherhood lasted for 1 hour and 24 minutes. Does that sound right to you?
that could be. I mean, when you're in the fight, it only feels like moments, but
Mm-hmm.
I could believe if that was the number given, I could believe that. Yeah.
Yeah, it was a brutal fight. Of course, we were then later joined by the Midwest Nomads that we paid 20,000 caps to be in that war for 3 days.
Either 20 or 30. I can't remember the exact number.
Okay, but well, we paid them
It was, like,
thousands
it was
of
an
caps.
exorbitant amount, probably more
Hmm.
than they're worth. Yeah.
And can you tell me what happened with that?
Well, they helped us for one fight, I believe, and then betrayed us, and so
Yeah, that was you know
they pulled out of combat and actually started assisting the Brotherhood against us, which we weren't even at war with the Brotherhood anymore, but the Brotherhood was upset about everything that had happened, and so they were going to make it a problem.
Yeah.
for us to cross over to fight the communists.
And
And
how did that
so,
work out for the Brotherhood?
well, I mean, they didn't have much peace.
Hmm.
Naturally, we couldn't take territory because they folded like a lawn chair, but um, I mean, they didn't get to hold their wall for very long. We just kept taking it and retaking it and taking it once again. And
Yeah, my favorite thing, that I'm drawing these battle maps here. One thing that I noticed is I had no idea that Cassius was fighting a three-front war. He had been attacking Yusuf in the north. He had been dealing with the Brotherhood of Steel and the Ecclesiastes. If you recall them, I know it's faint, but they had taken that radio tower while we were too busy fighting off the communists, Yusuf, Brotherhood of Steel. They kind of snuck
well,
in and pulled that tower.
yeah, well, from what I gathered, it was we were fighting in what was firmly Brotherhood territory and pushing the Legion out of Brotherhood territory. And of course, they stabbed the Brotherhood. Thanked us for this effort by stabbing us in the back and twisting the knife, not giving us any territory, and handing it
Mm-hmm.
over to the Ecclesiarchy instead. After we put all that effort in, and so that was their reward for us, was betraying us. And so, if you're not picking up on the trend here,
Oh, I think
uh,
I am. The
these
best part about
all of you people in the wasteland, they speak in doubles. They promise you peace, but they plan for betrayal, and they usually do.
And speaking of betrayal, when they went to battle with us and they got decimated, they had then later fell back and became the communist of America. I had no idea that we had defeated someone so innately that they ended up becoming communists. Can you believe that?
I can believe it. I had heard similar reports of remnants of the Legion joining the communists and other factions in order to continue their war against us because we had killed their false legate and they had no one else to rally behind anymore.
Yeah, I think I've definitely noticed some of them on the crosses lining our roads.
I don't see most of them now. They're usually, if there's any left, they're drifters spitting animosity, as I said, as we pass by, and or they're just broken men with beards and silly hats standing along the road. Now, not much of a threat anymore. Just leftovers.
Well, one of the other things that I found in this research and listening to our scribes and things was USF ended up splitting off again. So not only did they divide twice, they divided thrice, and it's actually their more skilled men joined a group called the Iron Warriors. Now, do you have anything to say about them up until this point on the fifth day of?
Um. Well, I mean, initially, Iron Warriors weren't hugely noticeable faction. We'd had a few small sorties with them. At one point, they had tried to assault the radio tower while it was still under our custody, and we drove them back. But I mean, they were good warriors at that time, but they were kind of reclusive. Though going forward, of course, once we finished our march after destroying the Legion traders, once we made it to the capital, the Iron Warriors were a lot more concentrated and were much more amicable to us, I think is the word.
I definitely, one thing I noticed with the troop movements is those that came from the 10th Legion, those warriors didn't, we have not to this date had one single surrender, one single division completely wiped out. But that was common practice. The false legion was having a common sight of um, capitulating, being destroyed, and having to retreat. And uh, but I didn't notice that with the 10th Legion. Is that something that you also noticed?
Well, the problem was that the legate, the false legate, that is,
Mm-hmm.
um, he focused so much on negotiations and appeasement that nobody in the wasteland took him seriously anymore. And so, yeah, he could broker for a peace deal, but it might last 30 minutes. Like, it was mostly just so they could get advantageous positioning on us and attack and kill everyone. like they didn't care really to preserve any sort of peace, but he never saw through that because he always thought he was just such a great negotiator. But then behind his back, anyone could hear any of these factions in the wastelands laughing and insulting that man.
Another interesting thing was the Battle of the Wall that you alluded to earlier, where we were constantly battling that with the Brotherhood. Um, that's another indication of when the communist, USAF, Brotherhood, Raiders, Wastelanders, Ecclesiastes, you name it, they were coming for us. And they all got beat back. And in fact, I have personal experience with this where we had pushed their armored division so far back and so quick that the armor actually out retreated their infantry back to Montignac, where we had a safe haven agreement, and left their infantry just completely to bear to our guns, and we laid waste to hundreds in a matter of hours. So I would say that would be an example to all those dissenters that we did have commies, we had raiders, we had wastelanders, we had USAF, we had Brotherhood, we had Ecclesiastes. You name it, they were there fighting us, fighting against us. And, just look at the crosses lining that road. I mean, you can see someone from every faction there, essentially. And most would say that's firmly contested Legion territory at this point.
Yeah. And a lot of these conquests now just feel like I don't know, a footnote in a much larger theater now, especially now that we've made it to the capital and we're fighting on new soil.
Yeah, one thing that I'm hurting for in particular is, I'm a man who likes logistics, and we're so far removed from our Kaiser now that food and ammunition is becoming scarce. I'm seeing a lot of us resorting to looting. Do you know if Cassius has any plans on any monetary compensation for our troops moving forward?
I mean, me personally, I'm not sure. I'm not anywhere near the checkbook or the coin purse, as it were,
Mm-hmm.
of the legate. But I mean, I imagine that resources are stretched pretty thin, considering how far we are from our territory. We're essentially a forward legion, and a forward legion always is going to face these kinds of supply issues.
And do you think these supply issues have led to any um, reduced ability to fight, any defeats or any of that you've noticed?
I mean, it should. Like theoretically, it should, but no, it hasn't.
Well, I think we've really covered all our bases here. And how do you feel about being in DC? Flagstaff the second, or what?
It's nice to. I don't know. It's a nice change of pace being somewhere. I don't know, so packed with history, and I mean, there's just a lot going on in DC. I think, and a lot of new enemies too.
Mm-hmm.
Make no mistake. But I'm liking it. I'm doing pretty well, and I feel like the Legion's doing well. Maybe the lack of heat might be what's helping us ration better because we're not as taxed for heat as we would have been in other climates.
Mm-hmm.
And so maybe the cool weather and the rain is helping a little. I know it's helping with the water supply. We're able to set up some canisters and collect rainwater, and that's been good.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and of course, there is an alternative food supply that I've heard Cassius imbibes in, but it's not for me.
Yeah, I I thank you for your words, and I thank everyone for joining in on me speaking to Dominus Vindicta. Is that right?
Yeah, you got it.
All right. Yeah. Sorry, we had names before our Roman given names, so it's hard for us sometimes to remember them. But I'm Taurus Rex. Thank you all for joining in on this conversation. Next up, are super mutants to be trusted, and can you trust a ghoul? Thank you. And as I was saying, thank you for joining us today. I know you're short on time, but if you wouldn't mind telling us, Leggett, so how all did it start?
Many years ago, I was born in Utah, among the Mormon tribes. Lived there until raiders burned my village. I was 8. Spent years in the wild, scavenging, surviving. I took shelter in a cave and lived among wild dogs, became one myself. Then the Legion came. They crested over the horizon like a coming storm, conquering through the valley, driving the survivors into the mountains, straight into my cave. That's where my father found me, brought me to Flagstaff. There I learned the sword under Legate Lanius, reading in scripture from the priests, and war from Kaiser himself. But blood ties mean nothing. My father was a vulture, fat and content. While others fought, he'd rather sit on his laurels than carve his name into history. So I left, took Flagstaff's best, Fumentari, veteran legionnaires, and marched. From Nevada, I conquered it. I conquered. I took Utah, New Mexico, Wyoming, and most of the Rockies, even up to Idaho. Then, with my experienced legion, we marched eastward and stormed my father here, Everon.
Well, it's good information. Speaking of the Kaiser, what did the Kaiser say when you told him about the false legion?
The Kaiser spoke to me in confidence. I shall say only this: he was displeased.
X, so much more formidable than the false legion, even though many of our members were the same.
The foundation of our brotherhood: honor, integrity, and mutual respect. It allows us to operate efficiently as a team. I heed the counsel of my advisors and officers, and do not sit idly behind walls when there is war to be waged.
Why was Legio